Under committee department reports tonight, we have the fiscal year 2011 end of year fiscal statement. Now to be presented by our city manager, Dr. Russell Treadway. Mr. Treadway.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I get started, I would like to, give the good news that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But the city actually had a pretty good year this year, and I think that's something that we should all be thankful for and happy about. And this time, we're better off this time this year than we were this time last year, which is always a good thing to say. This is the fourth quarter financial report, and I will, as I always do, say that these are unaudited and unreconciled yet, so they are preliminary in nature, but they will be pretty close when we get to the finish. Typical contents of your quarterly reports: the transmittal memo, quarterly report detail, presentation with charts, and our fund balance report. And I will remind everyone that the full contents of this report will be available on the city's website tomorrow. So anybody who wishes to go look at that. Erica tells me it is one of the most popular sites on our city website, so please continue to go look at it. Again, we talk primarily in our reports here, these snapshots about our general fund, which is our major operating fund, and our sanitation fund, which is our major proprietary fund. These two funds make up the vast majority of the city's revenues and expenditures within the course of a given fiscal year. Here's our chart where we look at cumulative numbers through the end of the fourth quarter, the completion of the fiscal year, and each one of those columns leading left to right: 2008, 2009, 2010, and the most recent year, 2011. You can see in 2011 we actually had revenues in excess of $10 million, actually $10,026,310, which was a little over what was projected through our initial budget and the various budget amendments that City Council did approve. We actually were at about 101.24% of the revenues that we did project. Expenditures, there were $8,162,561, and that includes or accounts for some delayed capital expenditures, which we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. But that total represents a little over 95% of what we projected. We show an ending fund balance on this chart of a little over $2.3 million, and again, we'll talk a little bit about some delayed or deferred capital expenditures, which actually reduced that amount to a little over $1.9 million. If you look at our revenues by quarter, you can see our familiar patterns that we talked about in the past, where we, again, bring in the majority of our revenues in the second quarter. The first and third quarters are fairly good quarters. We do kind of break even in those quarters. And the fourth quarter is a quarter that we bring in less revenues than what we spend out, which you can see here on the next chart, which is our expenditures by quarters. And again, we're able to keep our expenditure levels pretty consistent from quarter to quarter through the fiscal year. Sometimes you will see a little bit of a spike in the fourth quarter, which is we generally try to reserve our large capital expenditures for the fourth quarter after we make sure we have enough money to pay for them, because we're never really sure sometimes. So you can see that pattern here. This shows the pattern over the last 16 consecutive quarters for the last fiscal year. Again, you can see the relatively volatile nature of our revenues, but you can also see the fairly consistent pattern of our expenditures. And actually, if you kind of go back and look at the initial quarters there, if you drew a trend line through that, you would actually see the trend line actually tapering down a little bit as we've been able to keep our costs down and operate in a more efficient and effective manner. And I do give heads and staff who have really continued to be very efficient with the taxpayer dollars, be very frugal with those dollars, but yet continue to deliver quality services with the resources that they have. Here's a look at our sanitation fund, again over the same periods. You can see current revenues over the last 4 years have actually declined a little bit, as have our expenditures. And as council knows, our expenditures are really demand-driven, particularly through our commercial solid waste collection. And one of the, I think that's one of the impacts that you see in the revenue side is we have seen demand go down primarily in our commercial collection, although we've seen a little demand go down a little bit in our residential service, but it's gone down in our commercial service, and that I think is a result of the economy and some businesses cutting back as they cut down expenses. On the revenue side, we came in at 100.8% of our projected revenues and a little over 98.3% of our projected expenditures. So again, we brought in a little more money than we estimated and spent a little bit less money than we thought we would. We brought in transfers of $389,786 from the general fund, which was again only about 91% of what we had initially projected in our budget. So again, another good sign. The ending balance in the sanitation fund is still negative, but we have reduced that amount significantly in the past year. That's showing presently a negative balance of $26,102. You total all of our funds together, you see we were up at about a little over $14 million in revenue this year. We did spend a little over $20 million, primarily because of our two large capital projects that we finished this year, the police department and the public works facility. And so that's one reason we could spend more than we had. But we did end up with ending fund balances in all our funds of a little over $7 million, which is on par with what we've had in previous years. Here's a look at those ending fund balances for the various funds that we do have. You see our general fund, which is our primary operating fund, and the 2009 SPLOST dollars, which are dollars, as everyone knows, they're set aside for capital project. We see some pretty good dips into that this coming year as we move on to Briscoe Park Phase 2. We'll also be doing some paving this year with money that's coming from the SPLOST for resurfacing and some road improvements. We'll probably see a good chunk of the 2005 SPLOST eaten up this coming year as well, as we move forward with the LCI project and a couple of other transportation projects that we have that money earmarked for. As I mentioned earlier, the stated fund balance that you see, the $2,345,622, is a little bit overstated, if you will, at the end of June. As council knows, they did reserve $290,000 in paving money that was in the capital budget in the 2011 budget. We have a number of other projects, capital equipment projects that we have issued contracts for, but we have not closed out yet. So that money hasn't been encumbered. That's another $84,127. So we actually have as an unreserved balance a little $1,971,495. Based upon a $10 million budget, which was the revenue amount last year, our fund balance target is approximately $2.5 million, so $1.971 million. We are at about 78% of that targeted amount, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a significant improvement from where we were last year. We were in the low 50% margin, as I recall, for that fund balance amount. So we have made some pretty significant improvements there, and I think that's something that council should be commended on for taking the necessary actions in terms of budgets and adopting tax millages and all those kinds of things that city councils do. And as I mentioned earlier, the work of our department heads and staff in keeping those expenditures down in a very effective and efficient way. So in summary, it was a very good year. It's our first significant contribution to the fund balance in 4 years, really only the second time in the last 8 years we've been able to make a significant contribution to our fund balance. Analysis, we got lucky on some revenues. Actually, revenues came in better than we anticipated. Particularly our commercial building permits we had some very positive action in that area this year. And we were somewhat unique among many of our sister cities in having the level of commercial business or commercial construction that took place inside the city this past year. And as I mentioned a couple of times, we managed expenditures extremely well again. We did complete 2 landmark capital projects, our police department and public works facility. Again, those were projects that were funded by SPLOST revenue dollars, but did provide necessary and much needed public facilities here in Snellville. So again, we're okay. We're better than we were last year, but we're making progress. We're not where we need to be quite yet, but we have made significant progress over the last couple of years from a financial perspective, as well as many of the other things that council and the community have done. Apart from that, me being the numbers guy, I kind of focus on numbers from time to time, and this is a financial report after all. So we are getting better, and we're on our way, and we just need to stay the course. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of the city manager? Mr. Spock?
Thank you, Dr. Tremblay. This is a great report. In fact, the last slide, if you can switch to that last slide, that was part of my question, and I was going to use this as a lead to the memo that we had received on email. For Snellville to realize its economic development goals, the city needs to be in a position to move quickly and responsibly when opportunity presents itself for themselves. Whether this involves acquiring property or investing in infrastructure to leverage large private investment, is crucial that we develop and maintain financial capacity to be a player. How much more do we need to have in either the general fund, roughly, or in reserve to be able to take advantage of some of these opportunities as they sort of stick their head up?
I guess I'll have to use one of my favorite answers, and that's it depends. I guess it depends on how active and how much of a player you want to be, and what you see the city's role being in economic development and in the development of the town center. As far as an operating, from an operating perspective, we probably need another $400,000 to $500,000 in the general fund balance. And again, it's not something that has to happen in 1 year or even 2 years, but I think over time that's really where we need to be. It would be nice to be in a position where there maybe is another, and again, more or less pulling a number out of the air, so to speak, but knowing some of the property issues we've looked at over the last couple of years, certainly to have another $1 million or so available to take advantage of those kind of opportunities. We wouldn't have had to, for example, on the Wisteria property, it was almost $700,000. To be in a position to deal with that on a cash basis certainly would have been advantageous to us. As we talk on some of the property on our LCI project, or even some of the things we've talked about in other parts of the town center development, to have that kind of cash liquidity available will certainly be an advantageous position to the city. Not to mean we can't finance those things in other ways, but certainly to be in a position to move quickly would be, I think, a very positive place for the city to be.
Just one follow-up. I know we probably don't have the authority to raise the debt ceiling another $1 trillion, so we can utilize that money. I think probably got much bigger, stronger guys out there trying to do that. But what is it besides looking at increasing taxes that we can do? Are we in hopes cetera. How would that work? I mean, just briefly, I don't need to, be.
Well, I guess the theory, so to speak, behind, lying behind a good part of the town center concept is the idea of building the tax base. Increasing the value of the property that is here within the city, both the land values and also building and other property values. That's really the way to enhance or increase revenues over time. As council is painfully aware, we've seen property values diminish every year for the last 3 years, and that's a trend we need to be able to stop and hopefully reverse. And that's really I think the long range, one of many long range objectives of the town center project and other things that we see going on in the city. We have things going on that aren't in the town center area. The hospital has just recently gone through some major expansion or getting ready to go through some more expansions. We've seen a number of developments on 124. We know some developments are going in on 78. So it's not just the town center where we need to build the tax base. It's within the rest of the community itself. But that's really, I think, where absent growing the city geographically through annexations, which certainly is another approach or should be part of the plan or the strategy. It is growing the values, of the property that's here within the city.
Thank you. Ms. Pender?
Couple of questions on a few of the numbers. I got a little confused on where we were on the fund balance. Dr. Treadway, on the general fund slide that you showed,
Okay.
I think towards the beginning, one more back, I think. Yeah, on that one. For fourth quarter 2010, it shows an ending fund balance of 1.4 million, 39,000. And I've just been working with a number of 1.368 as our ending fund balance from last year. Do you know what the difference is between what you've got on here and what the numbers were we've been using?
I'll need to check the number. The number that's there may be the pre-audit number from last year, and the 1,000,003 number that you referenced may be the audit number. But let me check on that to verify that.
Okay. Because I was having trouble figuring the difference. You're showing a net change in fund balance of 976 for 2011, which agrees to the June statements we just received. But then the ending fund balance actually, according to this graph, only went up by 906. So we dropped about $70,000 somewhere. I'm not quite sure. I was confused in trying to follow that.
I'm not following on the 9.
If you take the ending fund balance,
Oh, I see. Okay. I
the
see.
2,000,003, and subtract 1,000,004, the fund balance from the previous
I see what you're saying.
Okay, it should be the net change, and it's off about 70,000. So if you can check that, because I was trying to figure out the 2.3 million ending fund balance. And I guess my next question centers on that fund balance. When we were initially going through the budget, a little earlier in June, about mid-June, I asked you to project the ending fund balance, and we came up with a figure of 250,000 was the projected ending fund balance. And then we need, of course, to add back the paving and those other capital projects that are encumbered, which would get us to a fund balance projected presumably about $620,000. So, and where we're coming out with is actually an increase of 976,000. So that's a pretty substantial change from what we were figuring the budget on. I was wondering if you could address what that additional change in the fund balance was from, that we weren't anticipating.
Okay. As I mentioned, these are unaudited and not the final Usually at the end of the year, as part of the reconciliation and final audit adjustments, one of the big numbers that gets adjusted is a payroll number, because we want to make sure that the actual payroll number that was earned and paid through the end of the fiscal year, payrolls run about $200,000 to $250,000 every 2 weeks, so that could be easily a $175,000 to $200,000 number that could get adjusted. The others are probably that simply that as I mentioned earlier, the revenues have done better than we thought they were going to do. I'm a pretty fiscally conservative guy, and I tend to estimate revenues low and expenditures high. And so if I make a mistake, I hope to bring in more money rather than spend more money.
I believe in being conservative, especially when it comes to budgeting. I guess I do want to recognize, though, that we are in tight economic times, and we did have a tax increase last year. And I'm just wondering if, knowing that we were going to have this type of ending balance, that puts a new light on the millage rate proposal that I had made at 5.7. So I'm just, it's just difficult when we're dealing with taxes and money that we're taking from our residents, our citizens, in helping to fund the city. We do need, the budget definitely needed to go in a better direction. We were dipping into the fund balance every year rather than building that fund balance. So we are definitely heading in the right direction now, and I'm very comfortable with that. I guess I'm a little concerned with the magnitude of how much we've come out ahead this year, considering the economic times that we've had, and recognizing that some of that was unexpected revenues from the building permits, which was all really great. We just need to be careful with going forward that we're not being a little too zealous in what we're doing on the budget. And trying to figure out a way that we, it's always difficult with the numbers, but trying to figure out a way that we can get to a little bit better projections in the future. I don't know that we've done a whole lot of future projecting in the past. One of the things I'd like to see in this coming year, once the budget has been set, I think there's going to be an amendment to that given the millage rate that we plan to set. But once that budget is set, that we break that budget down into a monthly cash flow projected budget. Because the revenues of the city are collected at all different times. You've got property taxes that come in during certain months. You've got insurance taxes that are collected, in a couple of certain months, and everything's not earned evenly throughout the year, and the money's not spent evenly throughout the year. So it's difficult as a council member to look at the monthly reports and know what's been spent out, what still has to come in. There's not a lot of things you can do, or easy ways to look at the budget, as you would in a business that tends to be a little more stable, because you have these wildly fluctuating revenues all over the place. So I would recommend going forward that budget is broken down into a monthly cash flow budget to make it easier, a little easier to track, the expenditures and the collections as they come in, and know things that are coming in the future. It might help us to be able to project these fund balances a little bit better. I believe I had one other question, if you'll bear with me. When we were talking about the millage rate, we all got confused with all the numbers that were flying around at the last meeting. You were projecting a millage rate based on a 94% collection rate. Is that correct?
94.5, thank you.
Okay, when I look at the June financials, and I look at year-to-date property tax collections compared to what our current budget is, we've actually collected 99.44% of that current budget. Can you explain why you still want to only project at 94?
The number that's shown as the revenue in the budget is not 100% of the tax levy, it's less than the tax levy. What the 94.5% is based on is the total tax levy. So what was shown as a revenue estimate in the 2011 budget, I think we used 97% was, so the number that's shown is the revenue item in the budget is not the 100% of tax levy, it's 97% of the tax levy. So we were bringing in 95 or 96% of 95 or 96%. So what's in the budget is 94.5% of the levy.
Okay. So you're saying you're saying the 4.2 million that we budgeted was 94% of the tax levy?
I don't remember the percentage we used. The tax levy last year was just off the top of my head, I don't have my notes in front of me, was over $4.4 million was the levy.
And then we just budgeted
We
less
budgeted
than that.
less than that.
And then we've achieved what we budgeted.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
But the original budget estimate was $4.3 million. The 4.2 was amended down after we saw what we were coming in. The original budget estimate in 2011 was $4.3 million for property tax revenues. And if I could comment just very briefly on one of the other comments. As opposed to the bad rap that a lot of other government has at other levels, and some of it deservedly so, we do not, simply because something's budgeted, we don't spend it. We only spend it if we have to. And I think that's one of the reasons that the staff and department heads have been so successful. And you saw the one chart where consistently over the last 4 years, our expenditures are trending down. And over the last 3 years, city staff has basically, it's probably more than whittled, they probably chopped and carved well over $1 million out of annual operating expenses, just the operating expenses, not capital or transfers or debt or anything like that. And they've done that through just sound fiscal management and sound management of their departments. And we encourage them to do that, and that's one reason we come in at 95% or 96% of our projected expenditures. And it's because department heads and staff make a concentrated effort to be frugal with the resources they have and to be good stewards of that. So if we spend less money than we had budgeted, then we'll plead guilty to that, and gladly so.
Any other questions of the city manager?
Mr. Trevitt, and I certainly agree that your comments on staff, but some of these figures though, I just want to make sure we have a clear picture. In your presentation, you said that we had approximately 101% of what we budgeted as revenue. But our original budget was $9,665,300. When I take the $10,026,309, that gives me almost 104% of projected revenue.
The percentage numbers are based on the amended budget.
I understand. We started the year at a budget of $9,665,300. The only reason we would amend the budget, amend the income, is because we're getting more income than we anticipated. But we anticipated, when we set our budget in June of 2011, that we would have $9,665,300 in revenue. At the end of June 30th, we had $10,026,309, which is 103.73% of our original budget, correct?
I haven't done that math. I would presume it to be correct.
Okay. And then again, the same thing on our expenses. We originally had a budget expenditures of $9,665,300. When you do the math on the 93,41,835 that you have in your presentation here, that works out to 97.73%. I just want to put everything in perspective because although again I think staff does a great job and it comes in under budget, that's not the point of that's not my point. My point is that we had 4% more income than we anticipated last June. We came in under budget on our expenses. In one area, our commercial permits, which is kind of an indicator of where your city is going, we tripled what we anticipated in income over the last 12 months. That's a very good thing. That goes along with what I said on July 11th, that economic development in the city is going against the trends, okay? The problem I have is the surplus. For the last 2 months, we've been working on budgets, and millage rates, and it's very difficult to do that when you don't know where you're going to end up your year. How do you forecast what you're going to do next year if you don't know what you did this year? I just can't work, I don't work well that way. I'm going to tell you that when we first started this process in March or April, we projected somewhere around a $700,000 to $800,000 balance. I did some figuring. I went with Ms. Bender, her and I did some figures, and that's where we thought we would be. When we had a meeting with you, Mr. Treadway, I think we explained that to you, or explained what we thought there, and you came back the next day and gave us $250,482 as projected balance. On July 11th, when we're sitting here trying to do a millage rate, your projection at that point was we'll run a little bit of a surplus. Then on June 21st, I get year-end figures showing $690,000 of surplus over and above the funds that we have committed. And I believe when the figures come in, it'll be $1,077,000 before those deductions. First of all, I think if we knew on July 11th that we had a $690,000 surplus, we would not have had the arguments we had over setting the millage rate. I think it would have been a much simpler sell at that time, for lack of a better term. And I'll also say that it's very difficult, I repeat, that it's very difficult to make decisions when you don't have consistent information or information in a timely manner. I find it difficult, and I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to apologize. But I find it difficult to believe that it takes 21 days for the city to reconcile a month and close the month out. In every organization I've been involved in or owned, we have a trial monthly balance by the middle of the first and probably reconciled by the 5th. I don't see why we can't do that in the city. I don't understand why it takes 21 days to get the figures. And then for them to be, what happened between July 11th when we have a little bit of a surplus to July 21st, 10 days later, when we have $1 million? I have a problem with that. I'm glad, I'm not saying that, I'm saying that we should have increased our fund balance. I'm going to tell you that I don't think we should have increased it $700,000 or 25 or 30% in 1 year. I don't think that was our objective. I'm not really happy that we did it. I don't think we should have put that burden on our taxpayers. I'm not happy about it, and I think that had we had these figures, I agree with Ms. Bender, we would have gone lower on the millage rate this year than we have, because we certainly haven't wanted to do it. I'm befuddled. Again, I foresaw this, and Ms. Bender, we didn't want to say anything, because we wanted to see the figures for the end of June, and we could have been just as easily been wrong than we were right, although we didn't feel we were, and here we are, we were right. And the only person that Mr. Warner alluded to it on the 11th when he said he believed the balance would be higher, we just really did. And I'm not happy with that, and maybe that goes against the trend and rain on everybody's parade, but there's no way that I think that we should have added $697,000, almost $700,000 to our fund balance. That was not the reason that we raised taxes last year. Okay, and I think that we made it, but I think we should have done something this year, and by lowering the millage rate to give more of it back to the people. And that's the way I feel right, wrong, or different.
Does any council member have any further questions about the budget and not about property taxes? Ms. Gals?
I'd like an opportunity to respond to this.
Well, I mean, we're trying to, this was a budget. I know everyone wants to speak, but go ahead, Ms. Gals.
I think Mr. Treadway deserves some thanks and some gratitude. I think he has done a wonderful job on this year's budget. Contrary to what my colleagues have said here from the bench, I believe it's through his hard work that we're in this position here tonight, not through his misinformation. Last year, before the budget, in government, you know, everybody knows government doesn't work like everyday life. Government's backwards, right? A lot of times what we do is based on projections and figures, and as we've done every other budget, as Mayor Pro Tem Bender is familiar, I think this is probably her 6th or 7th budget, we always go forward on what the projected collections are going to be and what the projected property values are going to be. Last year when we passed the millage rate, I voted against the millage rate increase because I believe there were cuts in the budget that could be made. Unfortunately, at that point in time, my colleagues weren't interested in considering those things, but I think that Mr. Treadway and the staff need to be condemned, excuse me, not condemned, sorry. Needs to be congratulated for their hard work, because they did see that those cuts could be made. And instead of taking advantage of that and spending that money that we had been budgeted, they cut back and they've saved money. And this year's 2012 budget is the first time that we're actually, possibly depending on the millage rate we approve next Monday, have the opportunity to put money back into our general fund. So I want to thank Mr. Treadway and our staff for all the hard work they've done.
Thank you. Mrs. Bob?
No, I don't have.
All right. All right, that's it for this evening. We got other work to get done. All right, we'll now go into our consent agenda.